Well, joining me here in Westminster is the former Northern Ireland Secretary, Conservative MP Theresa Villiers, who of course was at that launch yesterday about the Irish border. And from Liverpool, we're joined by the Chief Executive of the Road Haulage Association, Richard Burnett. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Burnett, what would the consequences of no deal be for the road haulage industry in your view?
Well, for our industry, as far as I'm concerned, a no deal would be catastrophic for a number of reasons. I was on Sky News a couple of weeks ago talking about the issue of access to Europe and permits. And at the moment, the only contingency in the no deal is we've got ECMT permits, 1,200 of them to work off. We understand that government are negotiating or trying to negotiate side deals in terms of bilateral permits, but we need clarity. And I think not only the issue of permits, but actually the issue of the customs process and the customs union. What does that mean for British hauliers, but also European hauliers coming in and then trying to get back to Europe? I'm standing here today, the port of Birkenhead is behind me, and there are no contingencies being put in place here. If we have to have a customs process that creates delays, then that's going to have a knock-on effect to the just-in-time supply chain within the UK. And I think what you also have to understand is that in terms of European volume coming into the UK, that's like priming the pump. That goes into logistics and distribution centres around the UK to then do secondary distribution. And if that slows down, we will see a knock-on effect across our industry in terms of supply, but also jobs.
OK, well, we'll be back to you. Let's put some of that to Theresa Villiers. He says it would be catastrophic. You disagree?
I think it is vital that we're prepared for a no-deal situation, and I think the comments made by the Road Haulage Association, they have a point that we are very close now to exit day, and I would certainly have liked to have seen much more certainty than we're currently getting from the government. I think they should be listening to this kind of comment. Of course, an agreement is a sensible agreement or a free trade agreement is much better than leaving without a deal. Yeah,
but I mean, preparations for it are one thing. He's saying that's what's going to happen, whether or not we prepare for it. Something that you seem to think is quite a good idea, potentially.
Yeah, and my preference is for an agreement with the European Union. It's in their interests, it's in our interests. But it is, if the EU are not prepared to be reasonable, we absolutely must be prepared for leaving on WTO terms. And that means putting in the kind of infrastructure to deal with Dover.
But isn't that cutting off our nose to spite our face?
It's the duty of any government to be prepared for foreseeable contingencies. It is now certainly a possibility of leaving without a deal. I don't think it's the most likely outcome, but it's clearly a possible outcome, and the government must be properly prepared for it, including in relation to the issues raised by the haulage sector.
But you know that the priority for the government is to do what they think is a deal based on Chequers, which would avoid all of this, but you're against that.
My concern about the Chequers plan is that it doesn't properly respect the referendum results, because it
tries to look after the national interest.
I can see that compromise is needed, and there are aspects of the Chequers plan which would certainly be workable. My anxiety is that it goes too far in tying us into rules over which we won't have a vote. But also, my serious concern is if that's the starting point in our negotiations, it's only get pushed in one way by the European Union, and then after it's implemented conceivably, pushed even further in the wrong direction by the European Court of Justice.
But this is theology at a time when we've got real issues, as you just heard from the Road Haulage Association.
It's not theology.
Well, it is, because, you were one of the campaigners to bring Britain out of the European Union. It's quite clear. Everyone says we're going to leave. We'll no longer be sitting in the council meetings. And now, on a theological interpretation of it, you are proposing something which, the people at the coalface are telling you is going to be destructive to everyone's economic interests.
I believe that it's important to compromise, and I've supported many of the compromises announced by the government, and there are aspects of the Chequers plan and the compromises that I think are reasonable, but it does go too far in signing us up to rules over which we won't have a vote, subjecting ourselves to the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice. It's just not taking back control in the way that people voted for.
Mr. Burnett, what would you like responsible politicians to be doing at this stage?
Well, I think from our perspective, we've been really clear. You know, we're impartial. We're in the midst of this, and we're trying to deal with what's facing us. We want a deal. We need a deal. The implications of no deal at the moment are significant. And I think what's very clear is that no deal or a deal, we need a transition period, because both the EU and the UK are going to need to step into this and actually work through. So, you know, that's of critical importance, but we would urge the government to bring business clarity so that we can plan, we understand what we're planning for, we understand how we can actually deal with the situation.
This whole question of the Irish border, which of course is crossed by hauliers, suggestion yesterday that we could have a situation like the border between Poland and Belarusia. Do you know anything about that? Is that completely without a physical border?
I think from where I sit at the moment, you know, what I heard yesterday was kind of pie in the sky. We're so close to switching. We're so close to Brexit. We haven't got time to plan. We haven't got time to put these things in place. CDS, which is, you know, the customs declaration system that's supposed to be implemented next year, isn't ready. You know, so if we're talking about systems and processes that are going to speed up the processes at borders, you know, from an industry perspective, we just can't see how these things will be put in place right now, ready for a hard Brexit.
Do you know about this Belarus-Poland border, which apparently doesn't exist?
Well, I'm not in a position to comment on the
Well, it's one of your colleagues who raised it and suggested
Belarus border, but I'm convinced that we can maintain an open and free-flowing border in Northern Ireland under a free trade agreement. We don't need the Chequers plan in order to make sure that you know, life in the border counters is not disrupted. There is a practical way to do it in line with existing technology and existing rules within the Union Customs Code, which enables the border to stay.
But you see, the problem is whenever you look at borders between a trading bloc, whether it's between Switzerland and the European Union, or indeed between Canada and the United States, what you actually see is a border, a hard border where lorries can be stopped, cars can be stopped, things can be searched, things can be accommodated. I mean, it is, you know, to use his phrase, a bit of a cloud cuckoo land, isn't it?
But if one talks to experts like Lars Carlson, who's the European Parliament...
But give us an example of where this exists.
Well, Lars Carlson, who was the expert appointed by the European Parliament to look at these issues, said that a border without infrastructure was perfectly possible. Trials had taken place in relation to the Norway-Sweden border, and whilst it hadn't yet been implemented, that was only because the existing measures on that border are deemed to be adequate. Anywhere. It is possible to do, and that it's essential that we find a way to resolve these questions.
198 days. That's what we're talking about. 198 days to get this thing which has never been implemented, never been designed. No one takes your proposals seriously, as far as I can make out in the press today, even the Brexiteers. I mean, it's nonsense.
It is not. It is a thought-through plan, and it is vital that the government is preparing for measures to make this kind of thing possible, to ensure that we keep ports like Dover free-flowing, and also to ensure that we resolve this question around the Irish border.
But I'll come back to it. You're a Conservative MP, a former minister. Your government is coming up with proposals, and you're not supporting them.
As I said, I can see why they're making some compromises in relation to the Chequers plan, but I think it goes too far and doesn't respect the referendum result, because it would leave us subject to many single market rules over which we wouldn't have a
Okay,
vote.
so you will vote against an agreement based on Chequers in the House of Commons, will you?
I'd look at whatever agreement is reached and make a decision on that agreement, and also on the alternative scenarios. I think one has to judge these votes on the context in which they arise. I'm not saying that in all circumstances I would vote against something that was based on the Chequers plan.
And have you looked at, you would really like a Canada-type solution, wouldn't you?
I believe that a broad-ranging free trade agreement along the lines agreed with Canada, but with additional cooperation in relation to many other areas such as security, is the right way to go. But we would be seeking a unique relationship with the European Union. Because,
I mean, the problem really is basic geography, that Canada's relationship to Europe is rather different from ours, isn't it?
It is, but it doesn't mean that the structures in a wide-ranging free trade deal wouldn't be suitable for the UK-EU relationship in the future.
Do you think that's good enough? Finally, Mr. Burnett?
I don't think so. I don't think we've got sufficient clarity. We haven't got the answers that we need. Time is ticking away. You know, as I say, deal or no deal, we need a transition period. We need to make sure that that's delivered, and that's clear to everyone.
Thank you both very much indeed.